First at 5. From the University of Florida's College of Journalism and Communications, you're watching WUFT News.
Welcome to WUFT News First at 5. I'm Gabriella Mercurio.
And I'm Ethan Curtis. Thanks for joining us. A week has passed since Russia launched its invasion of Ukraine. As cities in Ukraine begin to fall under Russian control, the White House and world leaders are looking for any way to stop Russian President Vladimir Putin's path of destruction. The White House sanctioned more Russian oligarchs today, and President Biden is weighing a ban on importing Russian oil, a move that has bipartisan support on Capitol Hill but could impact the U.S. economy. Alice Barr has the latest from Washington.
Ukraine has lost its first major city to Russian control as Russian forces step up their brutal assault. President Biden dispatching Secretary of State Antony Blinken to meet with allies in the region, while Ukrainian and Russian officials resumed peace talks today, tentatively agreeing to a temporary ceasefire in some areas to let civilians evacuate and bring food and medicine in. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky now calling for a direct meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin.
I think I have to talk with Putin. The world has to talk with Putin because there are no other ways to stop this war.
Zelensky says he's willing to offer concessions, though never on Ukraine's independence. President Biden meeting today with his cabinet as the U.S. announces new sanctions against wealthy Russian oligarchs close to Putin.
I'm banning travel to America by more than 50 Russian oligarchs, their families, and their close associates.
The president also weighing a ban on importing Russian oil, a move gaining momentum with lawmakers in both parties.
And right now, we are subsidizing the war machine of Vladimir Putin, and I don't think any American wants us to do that.
But cutting off Russian oil risks driving soaring gas prices even higher. Lawmakers urging energy companies to increase production
so that they can support the free world as we're trying to fight this tyrant.
Ukrainian forces digging in their fierce resistance, while the United Nations estimates more than 1 million people have now fled their heartbroken homeland. In Washington, Alice Barr, NBC News.
This situation in Ukraine sparked intrigue from people all over the world. In the United States, citizens worry about what potential U.S. involvement may bring.
That's right, Gabriella. There's been a lot of speculation in the U.S. over a draft or the potential deployment of Army reserves. I spoke with 2 Army reserves about how they feel. I also asked a University of Florida professor to explain what it would take to get to that point. Take a look. As the conflict in Ukraine heads into its 7th day, U.S. citizens express fears of a draft or deployment of Army reserves.
Me and a couple of my friends I have actually gotten out with and just talked about this is actually happening again.
Images from Ukraine prompted anxiety in Michael Hosmer, who served for 5 years on the USS Bonhomme Richard as an airman ordnanceman. Since then, he's completed schooling and is now trying to start a new career in 3D animation. But now, Hosmer is worried that further U.S. involvement may interfere with his new career.
It's just kind of unnerving to me.
Reserve Malik Nash shares some of Hosmer's fears, but he says he hasn't given it too much thought.
Over the past few years, at least in the beginning of each year, there's been some kind of life-changing world event that's happened. And part of me just thinks this could be really bad. This is like the brink of World War III. But the other part of me is just thinking we've literally gone through this for the past 3 years. Only this time there's way more conflict than before.
University of Florida International Relations professor Zachary Selden believes the likelihood of a draft or mass deployment of reserves is slim.
If any reserves are called up, I could only imagine that it would be to backfill for some people who have deployed, who are active duty, or if they have particular military specializations that are in high demand in those regions.
In addition, Selden shared that the U.S., along with its European allies, will not get directly involved in this conflict.
And the reason is quite simple. Ukraine is not a NATO ally with that guarantee of mutual defense.
For now, just like the rest of the world, U.S. Army reserves sit, watch, and wait as the situation in Ukraine unfolds.
I spoke with a UF associate professor and clinical psychologist, Carol Lewis, and she expressed the importance of taking breaks from the news as you follow traumatic current events like these. One suggestion, some phones allow you to track your screen time. That way, you can keep a record. Back to you.
That's a neat suggestion, Amy. Thank you. Students at the University of Florida support Ukrainian citizens through peaceful demonstration and social media outreach. Organizer Sasha Nelson is one of the creators of UF Ukraine, a community of Ukrainian students. Today, the group gathered in Turlington Plaza to protest the Russian invasion. They were joined by plenty of other students holding signs and flags. The crowd chanted, "No war in Ukraine, and there are no excuses for human rights abuses." Decked out in blue and yellow, UF Ukraine students came together to help their loved ones.
It was just really difficult for us to watch what is happening with our families and friends and not take any action.
Instagram posted links for the National Bank of Ukraine, Project Hope, and Care Crisis Fund. These resources allow anyone to supply Ukraine with humanitarian aid, armed forces funding, and medical kits. UF Ukraine will travel to the national rally in Washington, D.C. this weekend.
Joining Total Wine and others, Publix will ban Russian alcohol from its liquor stores. Publix says it stands with the people of Ukraine, and even though a flyer printed for release today features a Russian-made vodka, it will not be available for sale. That item was bounced from the online version, but the printed versions are created weeks in advance. We'll have more Russian reaction news later in our PolitiTalk segment.
A convicted Orlando cop killer now faces a death sentence. In 2017, Markeith Floyd was on the run after killing his pregnant ex-girlfriend when he killed Orlando Police Lieutenant Deborah Clayton. Lloyd is serving life for killing his ex, and the sentence this morning was death for killing the officer. She was shot 4 times in a Walmart parking lot, including a shot to the neck. The police chief and sheriff attended sentencing, with the sheriff saying afterward, "You can't just execute a cop and not pay the ultimate price." A JetBlue co-pilot on a flight to Fort Lauderdale was removed after a TSA worker thought he might be drunk. It happened on the tarmac in Buffalo. Police say James Clifton was immediately given a breathalyzer. It showed .17, well over the .04 limit by the FAA. Clifton, who lives in Orlando, may face federal charges.
At least 3 people are dead after several crashes this morning on I-95 in Volusia County. More than a dozen vehicles were involved in 5 separate crash scenes, one of which sparked a massive fire. Along with the 3 killed, several other victims, including children, were taken to hospitals. The area was under a dense fog advisory at the time.
Very scary. Fortunately, no fog in our viewing area this morning.
WFT's Nicole joins us now with her first look at the forecast.
Yeah, thankfully we've had no fog here this morning in Gainesville. We do have some potential for some fog as we head into Friday night and into Saturday. As you can see, Gainesville and eastward, we do have that potential for some fog. Now, as we take a look ahead for your weekend, well, tonight we are cooling down just a bit, going to be in the upper 50s. And then on Friday and Saturday, we will be staying warm and sitting in the upper mid to upper 80s on Friday and Saturday. Back to the desk.
Thanks, Erica. Rev up your engines, Gainesville, because drag racing season is getting started. The 7th annual Baby Gators event began today at the Gainesville Raceway. Baby Gators is a warm-up for Gator Nationals, a major race held by the National Hot Rod Association. Next week, Gator Nationals will attract fans and drivers from around the nation. Dragster driver Mick Steele is excited to return to the track.
It's wonderful coming down to Florida for Gator Nationals. It's our first East Coast race of the year. I'm from Tennessee, ready to get away from the winter.
Gator Nationals will be held at the Gainesville Raceway from March 10th through the 13th. Gabriella, this week has been packed with political news from around the world. What can we expect on today's PolitiTalk?
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about. Coming up on WUFT News, first at 5, we'll tell you what came out of the latest talks between Ukraine and Russia.
You're watching WUFT TV News.
Welcome back. Now bringing you the top political headlines in Florida and around the world. This is PolitiTalk. In a second round of face-to-face between Ukraine and Russia today, the two countries say humanitarian corridors were agreed upon. Representatives from both countries met in the Brest region of Belarus, discussing a potential ceasefire, armistice, and the establishment of humanitarian corridors for the evacuations of civilians from cities targeted by Russian attacks. While the establishment of human corridors was agreed upon, Ukraine says the talks still did not deliver the results needed. Russian President Vladimir Putin also addressed his Security Council today. Putin said Russian soldiers and officers are real heroes, fighting, quote, courageously, stoically, and with full awareness of the rightness of their cause. Despite Ukraine's resistance, he also said that the current operation is going according to plan. In a new court filing, the January 6th committee argues Donald Trump and his allies engaged in a potential criminal conspiracy to change the election certification. The legal brief was filed yesterday. It focused heavily on former Trump allied lawyer John Eastman, who wrote memos arguing former Vice President Mike Pence could overturn the election. The filing is part of an attempt to grant the panel access to Eastman's emails. Eastman has refused, saying they are protected by attorney-client privilege. The panel is arguing to apply an exception for when a client is involved in criminal activities. Here in Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis is gaining attention for comments he made yesterday during a visit to the University of South Florida. DeSantis scolded students for wearing masks during his visit, which he made to announce funding for cybersecurity education. Take a listen.
You do not have to wear those masks. I mean, please take them off. Honestly, it's not doing anything, and we got to stop with this COVID theater. So if you want to wear it, fine, but this is ridiculous.
That's your Polititalk. For continuing coverage on the Ukraine crisis, count on the PBS NewsHour at 7.
Florida is joining a multi-state investigation into the impact TikTok has on young people. A group of state attorneys general announced the probe Tuesday. In addition to Florida, California and 6 other states announced their participation. Investigators will look at what the app is doing to keep users frequently engaged and whether that use poses mental health risks. They want to determine whether any of TikTok's practices go against state consumer protection laws. TikTok says it limits its features by age and designs its policies with the well-being of young people in mind.
We've had some warm temperatures this weekend, and I sure hope it will last through the weekend.
Our campus cam showing our current conditions, and it is looking beautiful out there. When we come back, Eric and Nicole will have your full weather forecast.
You're watching WUFT-TV News.
Welcome back. We haven't had much to complain about here in North Central Florida as we've had high pressure dominating our area, keeping our conditions warm and clear for the most part. As you can see, Campus Cam showing just that, clear skies out there, feeling like 78 degrees here in Gainesville. And for the rest of North Central Florida, we'll be sitting at above average temperatures, sitting in the upper 70s to lower 80s. I'm going for 79 in Gainesville, 81 in Ocala, 80 for the Villages, and a little bit cooler on the First Coast, 75 for St. Augustine, 77 Palatka, and 76 for Daytona. Now, as we head into the evening, we'll see a bit of a drop off as we head into tonight. So we'll be sitting in the lower 40s by 4 a.m. tomorrow morning. So tomorrow morning, again, we'll be sitting in the upper 40s. I'm going for 47 in Gainesville, 49 Ocala, and 55 for the Villages. Now, your high temperatures tomorrow rising right back up into the 80s. I'm going for 84 in Gainesville, 84 for Micanopy, and 83 for Keystone Heights and Hawthorne. And as we head south into Marion County, we're a little bit warmer, 86 in Ocala, 86 for Bellevue, 86 also for the Villages, and 84 for Ocala National Forest. Now, as we head into the weekend, high pressure will continue to dominate. So as you can see here, our future track showing not much going on. That high pressure does have a chance of weakening as we head into Friday and into Saturday, and those clear conditions will continue to persist on in as we head into Saturday and into Sunday. So as we head into the rest of your work, we will be seeing some moderate drought into the Nature Coast and into Gainesville, and then down south we are abnormally dry for this time of the year. So as we head into your next work week, we'll be warming up once again, but we do have our next cold front approaching us on Tuesday, bringing us a chance for some showers. Back to the desk.
Gator women's basketball takes on Vandy in the SEC tournament.
Our very own Julianna Reichenbach says a win at this point is a long time coming.
It certainly is. It would be their first second-round win in nearly a decade. Don't go away, sports is next.
You're watching WUFT-TV News.
Gator women's basketball takes on Vanderbilt in the second round of the SEC tournament. Welcome back, I'm Julianna Reichenbach. The Gators are a 5 seed and received a bye ahead of the second round. The Commodores, meanwhile, come into the game off a blowout win against Texas A&M. Florida looks to advance to the SEC quarterfinal for the first time since 2013. However, the Gators started down a whopping 12-0. Kiki Smith left the game after suffering an injury in the fourth quarter. At last look, the Gators trailed the Commodores 48-44. That was with 4 minutes left. The Gator men's basketball team looks to build up its NCAA tournament resume. Florida is currently part of Joe Lunardi Bracketology's last 4 out, but one particular player could be the key ingredient to moving on to the other side of the bubble. For much of the season, the Gator men's basketball team has had trouble scoring. Recently, though, that output has improved, in part because of the increased scoring by guard Flanders Fleming. Fleming has scored in double figures in 17 games this season, and the Gators are 13-4 when Fleming scores 10 or more points, becoming a reliable third scorer besides Colin Castleton and Tyree Appleby. In fact, in his last few games, he scored 16 against Vandy and 27 against Georgia, games in which the Gators scored over 80 points, 2 of their highest point totals of the year. The Gator baseball team posts its highest scoring performance since March 2019 versus Florida State. From the first inning, Florida exploded over Florida A&M. The Gators won by a final score of 17-0. Judd Fabian hit 2 home runs while 7 other Gators scored. All in all, 12 different Gators combined for 21 hits. Now, Florida looks ahead to a weekend series with Miami. Florida dropped the series to Miami at home last year but swept the Hurricanes 2 years ago. Fabian says he remembers the rowdy crowd in Coral Gables.
Yeah, it's loud there. It gets loud there, and it's not all nice things they're saying to you, so you kind of have to drown it out and go play, but it was definitely fun playing there.
First pitch is set for 7 p.m. on Friday. Over in Tampa Bay, the Lightning host the Pittsburgh Penguins tonight. The Lightning are coming off a 5-2 win over Ottawa on Tuesday. Meanwhile, the Bolts and Pens are 1-1 against each other this season. Pittsburgh took the first game in a 6-2 blowout in the season opener, but the Bolts got payback later in October, winning 5-1. Tampa Bay posted a 5-game winning streak. A win tonight would give them their longest winning streak this season. The Bolts currently sit atop the Atlantic Division and are second in the Eastern Conference with 76 points. Puck drops at 7 p.m. Moving to the NBA, the Miami Heat look to bounce back after a 1-point loss. Though they gave up a big lead to the Bucks last night, the Heat still lead the East. Forward Jimmy Butler had only 6 points, much lower than his average of 21.4 a game. Tonight, the Heat will face off with the 32-21 Brooklyn Nets. The Nets have something up their sleeve. Kevin Durant is expected to return after missing 21 games with a knee injury. The game tips off in Brooklyn at 7 p.m. And one last check on the Gator women's basketball game. The Gators are within 1 point now with less than 3 minutes to play.
I hope they can pull it off. That would be huge for the Gators. The Batman is premiering in U.S. theaters tonight, and here's why you may be paying a little extra to see it. AMC Theaters is charging more for the Batman than other new films. Entertainment Weekly reports tickets costing $1.50 more in LA. The theater chain's CEO told them variable pricing may be new to the U.S., but they've been doing it for years in Europe. The reboot of the franchise stars Twilight's Robert Pattinson. Gabriella, you going?
I'm in. Before we go, one last check on weather.
Looking ahead for your weekend, we are warming up as we head into tomorrow as that high pressure continues to build into the weekend. And then as we head into early next week, that is when a chance of showers will continue to rise into Monday and into Wednesday. And we will be back in the 80s as well. Back to the desk.
Thanks, Erica. BBC World News is next, and PBS NewsHour is coming up at 7. But your Florida news is always on at WUFT.org. Have a good night.